Hi there, I'm Jonathan Winton, and I have the pleasure today of interviewing Deborah Lyons and Henry Ziff, both the young members of Western Marble Arch Synagogue, to tell us a bit about their businesses and how they started up. Maybe if I could start with Deborah, could you tell us a bit about your background and how you came to start or manage your own business?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Jenny. Hi. I started my business. I actually studied fashion design in New York at Parsons, and from there I started working in a shoe business, and I was working with some brothers who had a shoe design company in New York. And not long after that I went to Italy, and I spent some time in factories in Italy learning how to actually make shoes. And from there, by virtue of a very good friend of mine, got my shoes in front of the head buyer at the time, or the fashion director at Harrods, and she loved them and got them into Harrods. So I sort of launched into the fashion world, or into the fashion business, without too much consideration really for the business side of the fashion part of it. And I guess, actually not that long after that, I also started with someone else, I started a tailoring business that was based out of New York. And through that, I met my now business partner. She used to have a store in Saudi. She's from Saudi. And she bought some of my pieces back then, and she loved them. So when I stopped doing it, she kind of dug me up and was like, "Why aren't you doing this? You need to be doing this." And long story short, we basically launched the brand together, and that was that. And it's been about 3 years now. I guess things have changed, like, since I started in shoes originally, and that things have changed quite a lot, and continue to change quite a lot in the industry. But I think now, probably in most industries, especially now, it's just a question of trying to be at the head of the curve, as much as you can be, and being open to change.
Absolutely. We're definitely going to come on to some of the change that's happening in your industry a bit later. Henry, maybe you could tell us a bit about your own background and how you came into the trans world business.
Sure, thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, so my background was strategy consulting. So I worked here in London for a small firm, helping kind of retail and consumer businesses develop into new markets, cut costs, things like that. And throughout that time was always kind of wanting to, I suppose, entrepreneurial, and wanted to start my own business, but didn't really want to kind of do the professional service, sell my time. Find kind of a different business, different model. So I started my own consulting practice, and at the same time, actually, Michael, who many people will know, was launching Trans World here in the UK. So we started working together.
Okay. And before we get into the nitty-gritty of both of your industries, I suppose it'd be great to start by hearing about obviously you've both got a very strong Jewish identity, so it'd be interesting to hear about how you sort of applied those values of sort of community and being Jewish that you've picked up over your lives to how you sort of conduct yourself in business, whether it be with customers, suppliers, and just to understand about how you sort of translate those values into your businesses. Maybe Henry, you start us off.
Sure, yeah. So I think they kind of sit very well aligned with what we do. So at Transworld, we help kind of small and medium-sized businesses, kind of local community businesses or business owners sell their businesses. So yeah, it's all about kind of having great relationships in the local community, and kind of developing those over time. But it's not just the kind of community stuff. It's also, I think with us, both kind of, we're a family business and have a wider kind of family network and feel to what we do. But also kind of that continuous education and learning is really important for us.
Okay. And Deborah?
Well, I think also similarly, since we launched, we've been really focused on being a company that has values and creating a culture that gives back. I think in line with this, we've been kind of, I think actually, to be honest, most of the success stories of the younger brands that are, kind of taking off nowadays have a little bit more to them, and it lies within their ability to create to create a community around them. And I think the community, really plays back to where we grew up, how we grew up, and our Jewish values, very much so. I think it's also like that sense that you have to have something deeper than just a product in order to make, you know, people connect with it. So you know, we've got a charity component that we've had since the beginning. At the moment, we're giving money to Trussell Trust, because that's a food bank charity around the UK, because it's like for underprivileged families during COVID. But, you know, hopefully post-COVID, hopefully we want to split that between female education programs and conservation projects. So I think that's also, you know, charity is obviously also something that's like a supremely like important Jewish value, Tzedakah. So I think that's also like been really integral. I think a lot of these things have been things that we've put in place without me really stopping to consider that they are my Jewish values, but they are my value systems that have been like integral to setting up the company and will be also moving forward. And I think also actually to the benefit of the brand, hopefully, as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And maybe if we sort of dive a bit deeper into the sort of fashion industry, I suppose it sounds like you sort of started off with a very strong passion towards fashion and clothing and shoes, and you sort of developed the business side as you went along. I suppose it'd be interesting to hear how you decided where to source your clothes, how you decided on sort of the pricing of your clothes and just that side of things and how that developed.
Well, I think along the same lines as that kind of like having the basis of an ethical brand, we are a completely locally made, sustainable brand. Our clothes, everything's made in London, which is great for us because we can actually go and visit everything. So we also make sure that the quality control is really tight, and you know that all our staff are like well treated and all of that stuff. So, you know, from a supply chain perspective in general, it's really been really positive. During this time, it's been amazing because we've managed to actually be producing things for the NHS as well, which, you know, like just being able to locally produce has been really huge during COVID, and to keep, you know, our workers going has also been brilliant. Our materials are also like a lot of them are local, if not mostly European, generally sustainable or recycled fabrics, and we're trying to move as well, like more towards using dead stock fabric so that we have like full circularity as far as that in our supply chain. So as much as possible in that way, we're trying to, you know, like have a fully ethical business. As far as pricing, we say that you know, the ethos of our brand is that we want to dress the female leaders of tomorrow. So we've really worked hard that while we have all these like amazing materials and we want to produce pieces that are like timeless and you can come back to, we also really want them to be pieces that like our friends can generally save up for and afford. So we've really worked hard to keep the pricing competitive, and we keep working at that. But you know, we do have like a decent contemporary price point for the quality and sort of product that we do.
Is it possible to source sustainable materials and be able to sort of price it sort of at the lower end of the market, or do you have to automatically price it sort of relatively high if you're sourcing sustainable material?
I mean, I think there's so much more on the market now than there ever has been, and that continues to grow. I think it's really a question of being clever about your business. You've got a business like Reformation that maybe is, you know, the price point's lower than ours. It's like sort of £100, £120. They've been, since the very beginning, they've been completely using dead stock fabric. So they've managed to build a relatively low price point, relatively mass brand on, you know, still managing to do it without causing a heavy impact on whether it's like on actual production, on pouring dyes into the ocean, on like which they do a lot with cheap fabrics, on all sorts of things. So I think there's many different ways of doing it nowadays, but I think you have to be like transparency is now a huge thing. You have to actually be explicit about what it is that you're doing and why it is that you're doing it, and don't pretend that you're doing everything, because no one's doing everything. But talk about how you are doing what it is that you are doing, and then, you know, find ways to do other things better. But I do think that at all levels of the supply chain, you know, H&M are doing these green lines, and the people call that greenwashing now because their business is obviously, you know, really not green. But it is possible. It shows that it is possible. It's just going to take a massive amount of change for the big companies.
I suppose that leads on to just how you market your brand, and just the sort of the role of social media your business? I suppose how much time do you spend trying to sort of communicate to people on social media? And I don't know, could you talk through some of the sort of pros and cons of using social media generally?
I mean, I definitely don't spend enough time on social media. Ideally, I would have a whole nother person like me who looked like me, but was completely different personality wise and loved doing that kind of stuff. And also like just could do it all day, because essentially, ideally, you would have a person whose sole job was social media and content creation and all of that stuff. It's so integral now. I don't, how much it sells still, like, it's a little bit iffy, but it is definitely like the biggest, the first window and the most immediate window for people to go and see your brand, especially like, beyond below a certain age group, I assume more so. But social media has become like such, and even the way that they've made it shoppable now, and it's so linked to, it links in with your websites and all the platforms connect. I don't think there's any way that you can really run a business like mine without really using social media. For me, yeah, it's annoying. I don't really enjoy it that much, and I would love to have another person, as I said, that could do it and pretend it was me. But eventually, hopefully, I'll get there. But yeah, in the meantime, I don't do enough of it. But the more you do, the more rewards you get in reality. If you do it right, you have to do it right, and yeah.
And do you have people to advise you on what to do on social media, or is it sort of, do you sort of shoot from the hip a bit?
Well, a bit like what I said, like it kind of, everything feeds back into each other now. So it's like our website works alongside with our social channels, works alongside with like what we're doing in terms of like our wider marketing, how we're talking to buyers. So everything's kind of playing into each other in some way. So I guess, yes, I do have people who are advising me, and we all kind of work together on it in a way. We all kind of work together, it's like a pool of ideas at the end of the day, and some of them are crazier and some of them are more easily actionable.
Okay. And then I suppose probably the question on a lot of people's minds is just the sort of the impact of the pandemic on your business. I suppose everyone's probably sitting at home in sort of tracksuits and t-shirts and very casual. I suppose, when do you expect people to return to formal wear? Do you think it will take a while for people to start to sort of dress up again, or do you think actually there's a sort of a pent-up demand for people to actually go out and be smart again?
I mean, I think it's a bit of everything. I think that on the one hand, like, people are going to be working at home a lot more. So, even when you're thinking about fabrics and things, you may, and general office dressing, blazers, stuff like that, maybe it's less of that kind of thing. I mean, we even made a pair of silk pajamas that you could in theory wear out, but we even made a pair of silk pajamas like early on in this, and we sold those quite well. So, like, I mean, because we're local and small, we can be really adaptable to the kinds of things that we do. But yes, I do think, I mean, now the weather's nice, I definitely think like all our girlfriends want to go out and put on a nice dress and enjoy the sunshine and feel like themselves a bit. They don't want to live in tracksuits and stretch. But on the flip side, realistically speaking, if you're sitting at home all day in front of a computer, you don't need to wear your like nice trousers. You're just going to kind of ruin them, you know what I mean, by sitting in them for no reason for long periods of time. So I mean, I don't know, I think things need to shift a little bit to be like, maybe it's the fabrics that maybe you need to look at, and like what, how are you working that. But maybe that's more winter wear as well, because I think like for summer, girls still want to wear dresses. I think they still, it's maybe the more officey stuff and the really formal stuff now would have been really hit. I think like, red carpet dressing must be non-existent right now. But yeah.
Okay. And Henry, maybe moving over to you, could you tell us a bit about sort of the trans world business model, what actually it aims to achieve, what it does, and just a bit about that, please?
Sure, yeah. So in effect, what we do is help small and kind of medium-sized businesses across all sectors. So everything from kind of the local convenience store to multi-site kind of unglamorous manufacturing plants, help those kind of typical business owners exit and sell their businesses, and we're kind of so kind of, I suppose, slightly corporate finance in that regard, but we were kind of more focused on the actual exit and helping them leave and retire into the sunset Typically kind of our clients have run their businesses for 20, 30 years. And the kids don't necessarily want to go and work in those businesses. So it's finding a way for them to exit and helping other people invest and buy those businesses. And that could be anyone from like from a first-time buyer all the way through to kind of strategic buyers and private equity.
And they're literally businesses in any type of industry.
Yeah, so the last couple, I suppose we've sold through the last few over lockdown, things from IT services to logistics businesses. That business was actually doing really well. Clearly everyone, or their clients were people sat at home ordering stuff from Amazon and everywhere else. So yeah, everything, every industry.
Okay, and I suppose, yeah, how do you get your name out there so that all these companies, these small businesses can actually find you to sort of get in touch, to sort of know that you can help them sell their business?
Sure, yeah. So, well, we try social media. Social media is not necessarily good for us, but I think, as Deborah said, it's kind of the first place people see you. But we do all sorts of marketing, everything from kind of old school cold calling, that works, through to kind of, I suppose it's more kind of taking a holistic approach and trying to get everything working together. So kind of having a multi-channel marketing strategy where everything from the kind of outbound marketing things we're doing through to content creation, and really it's kind of helping, it's mostly just trying to educate people on what they need to do in order to have kind of a successful business exit.
Right, and how do you manage to stay close to all these businesses? Presumably there's sort of lots of small businesses under your umbrella that you sort of need to stay close to, because presumably one week they want to sell their business, the next week they're not so sure, and you need to keep the relationship, presumably. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. So everything we do is all about relationships, which is kind of why I like what I do. I don't see technology necessarily changing that for a long period of time. So yeah, we do, I suppose, we have kind of email programs that help us keep close to our sellers and buyers, and a variety of other kind of tools that we use. Unfortunately, there's no silver bullet with what we do. We've kind of got to do a bit of everything. A bit like Deborah, would love for someone to kind of be full-time doing kind of social media, engaging with people. That would be fantastic. And maybe that's kind of part of the next phase of our business.
And do you find that sort of sellers are generally realistic about what their businesses are worth? I can sort of imagine that people have sort of slightly inflated expectations about what they've sort of built over their lifetime. So how do you manage that situation?
Yeah, that's always the tricky one. That's the one that probably breaks more deals than anything else, especially at the moment. So yeah, it's really, it's just about educating. Most people don't know how to kind of what a business is worth and why it's worth that. So it's really just educating people on how kind of formal business valuation happens and all those things. So there's no secret sauce to it. Fundamentally, it's what someone's willing to pay and what someone's willing to accept in the kind of deal structure that happens.
Okay, and maybe could you elaborate a bit on sort of how the pandemic has impacted the business? Are you finding less people willing to sell, fewer buyers? Yeah.
So remarkably, we've kind of been, I don't know, probably not lucky, but we kind of put some good plans in place coming into the pandemic. We were really proactive about it. And kind of now we're seeing more people wanting to look at how to exit their business. We kind of, lots of baby boomers having been through kind of, I suppose, 9/11, 08, the recession there, and now don't necessarily want to kind of rebuild their businesses going forward, and they're really kind of trying to figure out how to go about selling their business. Yeah, it's been, I think like most businesses, it's been tough. We've got some amazing client stories where they've been able to kind of pivot their businesses into other things. So kind of a restaurant in West London now makes more money because it's now a deli and a takeaway than ever done before. But we've also had some clients that unfortunately haven't done so well. But yeah, so coming, I think kind of the next few months for us are going to be interesting, I suppose, and we're quite positive about the kind of market, and also kind of on the flip side, our kind of buyers and investors. We have more buyers. I think a lot of people kind of worried, unfortunately, for their jobs and maybe looking at buying a job. So people not necessarily not wanting to work in kind of the corporate world anymore, not wanting to commute, all those things, have maybe enjoyed being at home the last 3 months with their family and want to do kind of more of that and buy a lifestyle business.
Oh, no, that sounds very encouraging in what are definitely tough times. Maybe I could ask you both, from an ethical perspective, just what you think are the sort of the biggest ethical challenges that you come across within your industry. Maybe Deborah could start off on that.
I mean, I think I've maybe touched a bit on some of them, but I think for our industry, I think a lot of, there's the major, we're the second most polluting industry after oil and gas. I don't know if that's such a known fact, because it's probably slightly underplayed, but it's, the impact of that on the environment, on the human cost of that, whether it's children, whether it's just like actually, like as I mentioned, like dyes being pumped into rivers. I think, the impact of that on women, on all sorts, like it's such a tremendous scale that I think that there is so much that can be done and improved in our business, and has to be, to the point where it's kind of like it's so critical that it's otherwise kind of a horrendous industry to be involved with. So I would say that is moving towards something that's like, can be kept up, whether it's fashion shows where they just like throw all the stuff out, all the catwalk they put out for 20 minutes and then they just throw it out at the end of it, whatever. It's a real environment of waste, and that needs to stop. I would say that's the most critical thing for us.
Okay, and Henry?
For us, I think it's more kind of an internal market way of working. So we have kind of people in our industry who kind of charge lots of, I suppose, upfront fees and things like that, and don't necessarily do a very good job at selling people's businesses. So, business owners who, in many cases, it's their retirement, their pension, all those things. And they're not really that focused or bothered about really helping kind of sellers exit. So that's probably the kind of ethical thing that needs to change in our industry.
Okay, and maybe if we finish off just on any advice you would give someone who wants to start their own business in your industry, any sort of nuggets of wisdom that you can impart. Maybe Deborah, you
go. I guess be prepared to never stop working. Always surround yourself with the best people who support you, but also challenge you. And most importantly, always treat others the way you want to be treated.
Okay. Henry?
Yeah, those are, I think, kind of very good values and things to focus on, and probably add to that, just kind of relentlessly push and have a plan and a goal, and try and map out the journey to achieve that, as best as possible. So probably add those ones to Deborah's.
Yeah.
Okay, well, no, thank you very much to both of you. I'm sure everyone watching this will see what brilliant jobs you've both done, and explain that to us today. So thank you very much. And yeah.
Thank you so much, Johnny.
Thanks, Jonathan.